Chapter 6. Businesses and their Costs. There are different types of businesses which are organized in several ways and vary in size. The following concepts are useful for discussion of business organization. A plant is an establishment that performs one or more functions in fabricating and distributing goods and services. A firm is a business organization that owns and operates plants. An industry is a group of firms that produce the same or similar products. Multi-plant firms may be organized horizontally, with several plants performing much the same function. They may also be vertically integrated. That is, a firm may own plants that perform different functions in the various stages of the production process. Finally, they may represent conglomerates that own plants that produce products in several separate industries. Corporations are firms that pool the resources of a large number of people. The resources are pooled through the sale of stocks and bonds. Stocks are ownership shares of a corporation. Bonds are certificates indicating obligations to pay the principal and interest on loans at a specific time in the future. Corporations tend to be large. Although only 20% of all U.S. firms are corporations, they account for 84% of all sales. Large firms are frequently faced with the principal-agent problem, a conflict of interest that occurs when agents, managers, pursue their own objectives to the detriment of the principal's, stockholders' goals. This problem arises in corporations where the owners, principals, usually do not manage the corporation. They hire others to do so. A crucial concept in economics is that of economic cost. When society uses a specific combination of resources to produce some product, it forgoes all alternative opportunities to use those resources for other purposes. The measure of the economic cost, or opportunity cost, of any resource is the value or worth the resource would have in its best alternative use. From the firm's perspective, an economic cost is the payment it must make, or the income it must provide, to attract the resources it needs away from alternative production opportunities. Economic costs may be explicit and implicit. Firms must consider both explicit and implicit costs. Explicit costs are the monetary payments a firm must make to an outsider to obtain a resource. Implicit costs are the monetary income a firm sacrifices when it uses a resource it owns rather than supplying the resource in the market. An important part of implicit costs is normal profit, a payment that must be made by a firm to obtain and retain entrepreneurial ability. We are ready now to define economic profit. Economic, or pure profit, is equal to total revenue less economic cost, including explicit and implicit costs. Contrast it to the accounting profit. In a more familiar explanation, accounting profit is the difference between total revenue and accounting costs that include only explicit costs. Economic profit, on the other hand, is smaller because it excludes implicit costs, of which normal profit is a part. Firms make decisions differently in the short run and in the long run. The short run is a time period in which producers are able to change the quantities of some, but not all of the resources they employ. A firm can adjust the number of workers, but not the plant's capacity in the short run. The long run is a time period sufficiently long to enable producers to change the quantities of all the resources they employ. The most important resource is labor. Total product is the total output of a particular good or service produced by a firm. Marginal product is the extra output or added product associated with adding a unit of a variable resource, such as labor, to the production process. Average product is output per unit of input. Marginal product of labor is equal to the ratio of the change in total product to the change in labor input. Average product of labor is equal to the ratio of total product to the total number of labor units. The law of diminishing returns states that as successive units of a variable resource are added to a fixed resource, the marginal product of the variable resource will eventually decline. Because in the short run the plant size is fixed, increasing variable input such as labor will lead to diminishing returns. Consider the following example of the law of diminishing returns. First unit of labor will produce 10 units of output. 2 units of labor, 25 units of output. 3 units of labor, 45 units of output. Notice that marginal product of labor so far is increasing. 10 units for the first unit of labor, 15 units for the second, and 20 units for the third. Now, as we add more labor, marginal product will decline. Finally, when we add the 7th unit of labor, marginal product is 0. Additional labor is not helping. If we continue adding labor to the same plant, it will get too crowded and marginal returns will be negative. In other words, total product will fall as we add more labor. Note that when marginal product is higher than average product is rising. When marginal product falls below average product declines. Let's plot these on the graph. The upper graph shows total product that is rising until marginal returns are negative, when labor input is greater than 7. The lower graph shows marginal and average product. Note that because average product rises when marginal product is above average product and falls when marginal product is below average product, the marginal product curve intersects the average product curve at its maximum. Consider production costs in the short run. Fixed costs are costs that do not change in total when the firm changes its output. Variable costs are costs that increase or decrease with a firm's output. Total cost is the sum of fixed costs and variable costs. Let Q denote the quantity of output. Average fixed costs are total fixed costs divided by total output. Average fixed costs decline as output increases because the total fixed costs are spread over a larger and larger output. Average variable costs are total variable costs divided by total output. As added variable resources increase output, average variable cost declines initially, reaches a minimum, and then increases again. As a result, the average variable cost curve is U-shaped. Average total costs are total costs over output, or the sum of average fixed and average variable costs. Graphically, the average total cost curve can be found by vertically adding the average fixed cost and average variable cost curves. Marginal cost is the extra or additional cost of producing one more unit of output. It is equal to the ratio of the change in total cost to the change in output. Marginal costs are costs the firm can control directly and immediately by deciding whether or not to produce an additional unit of output. Graphically, the marginal cost curve intersects the average variable cost curve at its minimum. This graph has lots of curves. Average fixed cost curve slopes down because the more units of output we produce, the smaller is the fixed cost per unit. The average variable cost is U-shaped, as we discussed previously. The sum of the two gives us the average total cost curve. The marginal cost curve intersects the average variable cost curve at its minimum. Long-run considerations are different because in the long run, firms can enter and exit the industry and can also adjust their plant size or build new plants. In the beginning, adding plants would lower average costs, economies of scale. But beyond some point, adding new plants would increase average costs, diseconomies of scale. Thus, the long-run average total cost curve is U-shaped. For each plant, a firm has a short-run average total cost curve. In the long run, the firm can choose to increase or decrease the number of plants. Thus, the long-run average total cost curve just envelops the short-run average total cost curves.